Hello, I'm Nicole Glenn, the co-host of the LLC podcast, and it is an honor to introduce listeners to inspiring women who are making a real difference in logistics and supply chain. With the LLC podcast, you'll hear inspirational stories, both personal and professional challenges our guests overcame, how their backgrounds help shape who they are today, how they empower others, giving back to their communities and often the world. So joining me today is Crystal Snow Anderson. So Crystal, thank you so much for joining me today. It's so funny when we were having our original chat, like how long we've kind of touched each other in the space. So I'm really excited to have you telling your story today.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to reconnect with you. I am so glad that you brought that up because I was thinking about that too and reflecting and preparing for our time this morning. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've known Nicole for as long as I have. And obviously we haven't been as close for the past couple of years, but it's great to be reconnecting with you and awesome to be here this morning. So thanks for having me.
For sure. You have such a cool story. Like I want our listeners to get a vibe on, what have you done? Because you've had some impressive jumps in your career, so I think it's always great to tell people maybe some of the obstacles or the helping hands that they had. And so I can't wait to dive into that. So can you go back in time? What do you do first of all, and go back to where you started? Tell me a little bit about your background.
Yeah, of course. So currently, I'm responsible for distribution and logistics, all of US and Canada for Ingredion, which is a global starch and sweetener provider. And we have just recently separated our business into two separate business units to really provide more clarity to the street on where our revenue originates. And so we've got the one side of the business, which is texture and healthful solutions, really our springboard of products possible to grow to frankly endless amounts. These are all of the starches that really provide texture. And again, it's called texture and healthful solutions for a reason, right? Because it's also pharma that's built into that. And the other side of our business, which we've kind of legacy referred to as the core side of our business, is food and industrial ingredients, is what I'm supporting in this new reorganizational structure. And it's really our sweeteners and our industrial starches. So all of those cardboard boxes you get, our starches are in it. Some of the drywall that is on the marketplace as well has it. So it's a great place to be. I've always been in the food industry, Nicole, which I feel you kind of can't go wrong. It's a lot of consistency, a lot of stability, but it's also very high pressure, right? There's a lot of regulations around food safety, and just we have to make sure that we're on point because there are people who literally depend on our products. It's not just, missing shelf time for a toy, which obviously is a really important business too, especially when we get to retail, like peak periods, right? But people are depending on us to live, right? And so in a lot of cases, and so it's been a great industry to be a part of. And that's what I'm working on today. But I really started like when I first entered the industry, I was working in LTL. I had just gotten my associate's degree. I wanted a little bit of a break, and there was a local company called Dorn Transfer. They're just a regional LTL provider in the Midwest, and they had an opening, and I took it. And I worked night line haul, dispatch, and clerk, and that's kind of how I got my start in the industry. But I grew up in a family, like my dad was a driver, my brothers were drivers, so I've kind of always been around it to an extent, but really got formal really early on in LTL. And once I finished my bachelor's degree, I went ahead and landed a job at Sara Lee, formerly Sara Lee, now owned by Tyson. And so again, in that CPG business, and had just a great kind of like first entry level role experience there. And it's just gone from there.
Yeah, I know. And that was one of the things that we were talking about was stepping in and then taking, these additional steps. And I've watched you from afar on LinkedIn, and I'm like, here she goes again.
Yeah.
So we were talking to, supporting other women. I wanted to ask you this initial question is, when you've walked into these different businesses, right, and there's men and women and everyone's, trying to work together and take those steps, what do you think that men do to help create workspaces? What can they do to help create more workspaces that are more equal amongst men and women, in your opinion?
Every single boss that I've had has been a man. And I've had opportunities to grow and learn and develop. And so when I think about the great bosses that I've had in my career, they haven't been afraid to challenge me. They haven't been afraid to challenge me professionally and interpersonally on how I present myself. I've gotten great feedback over the years on, hey, like you need to work on this because people don't take you seriously if you present yourself like this. And so I think when you work for men or work with men that are transparent, not afraid to give feedback. And frankly, like a lot of the men that I've worked for have had more women reporting to them than men. And those have been great experiences as well. And some of that's luck of the draw, right? Like you don't always, it's not like they're always picking their teams, but I think when you've got a really good thought diversity on your team, because I think just generally kind of men are hardwired a little bit differently than women are and how they approach certain situations. And so, you know, it's a really good balance. It's a really good balance to think about, you know, I've worked for folks who are really idea people, who they have really big strategies and visions and are able to think about what could be. I'm personally more of a, okay, how are we going to bring that to reality? How are we going to actualize that vision? And you know, a lot of times over the years, I think I've been perceived as a pessimist. The challenge with that, though, is that you have to have a sense of reality as you're executing these dreams, right? You have to think about, hey, what are my blind sides? What are some of the things that I'm going to run into? What are the things that we need to make sure go right in order to truly achieve this? Because I think there's kind of these pseudo achievements that we'll be able to get, but truly being able to achieve it means that it will sustain the test of time. And so making sure that you can put those people and those processes and then invest in the right technologies to all pair up and make those achievements long-term capabilities is kind of what I've always tried to do. And I've worked with a lot of folks who've had great visions. And so it's been a really good partnership over the years.
For sure. And that's the same for me. I've always been in the male spot, you know, being in transportation. All of my bosses too have been males.
Yeah.
And so it's been a great experience for me. I've never had a female boss. I mean, I think I did when I was like 16 years old and I worked in retail. But other than that, I've never had a female boss. But I think there are some great men in these spaces that, you know, they don't really see men versus women, or it's just you're an employee, you're a person, right? That they're trying to help learn and grow and teach. So with that too, I mean, is there anything that you think that they could do? Because not everyone is as fortunate, right? As we've been to have these types of leaders and mentors, you know. Do you think that there's anything else that maybe someone who's listening as male could hear as a tip on what could they do to make something better for maybe their female work employees, workforce?
Yeah, I think so. So I've reported to, I've had one woman boss, and it was my most recent leader. And I think that the major differentiation point, like I would say the number one thing that I would say that men can work on is empathy and understanding that how people present at work, what you see at work is not that person's entire life. And especially for working moms, working women, who have a lot more going on at home in a lot of cases than just showing up every day to the office. And I think that balance is continuing to level out. I don't think that that's as imbalanced today as it was 5 or 10 years ago. I do think cultures are changing, but understanding that there's always more to a person's story than what you're seeing in the boardroom or in the meeting room or at their desk, right? And being able to understand, I think, walk into situations with that understanding, but also realize when something's off, like be in tune with your folks, and don't be afraid to ask questions when you're kind of getting those spidey senses, I guess is what we call them a little bit, when something might be going on. And I think that was the major differentiator when I worked, you know, most recently for my woman leader, was that she had a good sense of, hey, I can tell that the team is getting stretched right now. Like, what do you need? And I think just that partnership and making sure that folks are taken care of. And again, men do a great job of taking care of their teams. I don't think that that's something that's lacking right now, but I think that staying on top of that in terms of a capability and a skill set is really important. You got to be okay with taking a step back from driving for those results every once in a while and making sure that your people are taken care of.
Yes, maybe just lifting up their emotional intelligence a little bit.
Yeah,
right?
That's a great point.
Yeah,
good way to put it.
So with women, what do you think women could do to equal it out? So I did flip the script on you there.
Oh, that's a good one. I have to be careful with this one, Nicole, because I've recently become aware of a term that is called toxic positivity, where you're constantly positive no matter the situation, and that doesn't always benefit. But I think, some of that is how I was raised, and to always just put your best foot forward and always try to be positive no matter what. It's okay to have negative feelings every once in a while.
Absolutely. It's human.
Yeah, it is. And so, something that helped me, I feel like, achieve some successes in my career is when I was, I don't know a better way to say this, but then like competing with men, right? When I was working with men and we were all driving towards this goal, I always just said, I'm going to outwork you. Like I'm not going to be afraid to like do as much as I have to do to achieve what I need to achieve. And I think that's where it links into toxic positivity a little bit, because you have to be really careful with that, to not overexert yourself, not overexert your team. And that's something that I've learned to maybe pare back a little bit in my career as I've continued growing and learning more. But I think women can, some of that comes with imposter syndrome, right? And it's not, we psych ourselves out every single day on some of these things, because I think we just haven't always seen women succeed in business and in logistics like we've seen men succeed. And so some of it's a head game, and frankly, like, we just got to get out of our own heads sometimes and and know that, listen, anything you can do, I can do better. is that like, but balancing it out and making sure that you do it in a healthy way for yourself and your team is critically important.
Yeah, I mean, when you're saying that, it's like a light bulb's going off in my head, because it was the same. I was trying to, I had kids, I had small kids at the time, and I really wanted to earn this high level position. And so it was like, I got to a point where I had to be working 75, 80 hours. I had to be, and then still trying to have quality time with my kids. And I completely burnt out. And when you do that, because you're trying to wear every single hat, you're like worthless to the world at that point, and it takes a while to get yourself back.
Oh, absolutely. So, my mom and I constantly will sit down. I know you have kids, Nicole. We were talking about that. I've got a couple of little ones too. And she's like, I don't know how you do it all. And I turn and I look at her and I say, I don't. Anytime I'm doing something for work, I'm making a sacrifice at home, more or less. And anytime I'm doing something at home, I'm probably more or less making a sacrifice at work. And I think it comes down to like prioritizing what are the things that are important, what are the things that are going to be noticed and understood and are going to drive for those key, indicators for us to be successful long term.
For sure. And I think it's working through guilt. I don't know if that's a woman trait. I definitely had that. And I would go, okay, how can I actually manage all of this? And so I called them sprints, where I'm like, okay, this is my work sprint, and I'm gonna have to work really hard during this time. And I know that I'm gonna make it okay that my family is doing this. So it is very, very challenging to have that balance, for sure. For sure.
Anytime you can get that pre-planning though, I mean, that's the golden ticket, right? And I think the thing with supply chain and operations and logistics is that you don't always get that forward notice. There's so often, right? When we're fighting fires, that's just the reality of it. That's part of our job, is making sure that we're that last piece to touch that product before it gets to the customer, and we're carrying it across the finish line. And so when you have the opportunity, I think this is something that I reflect on pretty regularly, is how do we more effectively and with agility zoom into the weeds when we need to make sure that we're carrying across the finish line, but also be able to very quickly zoom back out and get to strategy when we need to, because that becomes, when you're working in day to day and trying to make sure things are going well, and then you're also trying to work on strategy and figure things out, it's hard for your brain to switch between those two different mentalities. So that's definitely an exercise too. And if you can get ahead of that and start pre-planning and, to your point, get those sprints on the calendar so you can manage things, that's the golden ticket. That's where you can really start, I would say, hitting on all cylinders. So
For sure. I totally agree. So I have to bring up mentorship, because this is something, even when we first chatted, you had made mention that you've had great mentors. I mean, you even said it just a moment ago.
Yeah.
So in your mind, I'm sure, do you have mentors? Do you mentor other people at this point in time?
Yeah, I've had such an amazing group of leadership individuals over my career that have given me just invaluable feedback. And it's not always easy to receive, but I think this term is getting more common, that feedback is a gift. And not all feedback is always delivered well, but there's always a message behind what's being said. And so I try to make sure, I tell my girls this all the time, because I've got one that's kind of going into this, I already knew that stage. And so I'm like, listen, girl, you will never know everything. Learn something new every day. You're going to learn something new about something, or you're going to learn something new about yourself, but you're going to learn until the day that you die. You're going to learn something new every day. And so I try to make sure that I do that. And I try to make sure whenever, even if it's grapevine feedback, sometimes you'll hear something, there's something behind that. And I had a good leader at one point that told me perception is reality. And I fought with that in my head for so long, because I was like, no, it's not. This is not what I'm doing. And then it took me a long time to come around to it. But if someone thinks that you're doing something a certain way, they're not seeing the reality, and that's their perception, and it's their reality. So how do we make sure that we're adjusting our behaviors, because our brains are hardwired a certain way to act in a certain way, but how do we adjust our behaviors to make sure that our hardwire doesn't derail our leadership performance? So great amounts of feedback from leaders in my career. And I always try to help people. One of the things that I say, if you can learn from my mistakes, I will share my tuck my tail between my leg moments all day long. I always my team's success is my success. My leader's success is my success. It does no good for anyone to fail. So I always try to share as much as I can whenever I can without overstepping or oversharing in those situations. I've been also really lucky to have some good formal mentorship programs here at Ingredion. And I've been partnered with a couple of folks where we're in a sprint of a mentorship program right now. So I think just getting out and getting to meet different people, understanding some of the challenges that they see in different functional areas, right? You don't always have to mentor someone in logistics or supply chain. You can mentor people outside of. And in a lot of times it's just sharing experiences and understanding, hey, yeah, I dealt with that one time and here's what I did. And it didn't really work very well, or here's what did work very well, so that you can help those folks kind of strategize about how they want to approach those situations, because they may not have experienced it before. And I think that's really at the core of mentorship, is how to deal with different situations in a really professional manner. I also try to make sure that I meet with my extended team regularly. I want to know what's important to them, what their interests are, what they're concerned about. If they have questions about the team or the vision or the organization, that we have a chance to really transparently talk about things. And I get so much, I learn just as much from them, if not more, than I hope what I can share with them. And that's a really rewarding experience. And again, like I want everyone to have an amazing opportunity at being successful in their careers. So that's the goal behind it.
For sure. When you're mentoring someone, because I always feel like that's such a big word, right? And yeah. I think that people tend to think of it actually more formal than what it is. So in your mind, because I always say, you don't have to walk up to someone and be like, "Hi, Crystal, will you mentor me?"
Yeah.
You know, so how do you approach, like when you needed a mentor, right? I know some of them just kind of naturally happen, right? But have you ever sought out a mentor? Have you ever been in that spot that you sought somebody that you wanted to learn from?
I ask for feedback a lot, which I think is that informal mentorship that you talk about. And really, as you think about it, any interaction with someone, there's probably some level of mentorship in there. You're probably sharing tidbits of information somewhere in there that can be received as mentorship. And I think that's a really important thing is staying open-minded and just being really able to receive what people are trying to share with you. Because any interaction, it doesn't just have to be a superior subordinate. Like mentorship can be peer-to-peer. It can be, I've received mentorship from people on my team, right? And so I think it's very much a two-way street. And I think learning to manage up when you're managing your leader is a form of mentorship as well, and sharing experiences. So yeah, I think that's a great point, Nicole. Mentorship is not always formal. It's not always a program that you have to sign up for and meet on a cadence with someone. You can ask really insightful questions and really thoughtful questions in any interaction that you have with someone and gain some level of mentorship or give some level of mentorship.
For sure. So I do have to ask you, like, success. What's your definition of success, and why do you think that?
Yeah. This is hard because it changes.
A big question.
It is. It really is. And I feel like it changes with your career. I feel like there's different definitions of success depending on if you're early career or mid-career or maybe late career. And so I'm starting to realize more and more that I'm not early career anymore. I still feel early career, but I know I'm not anymore. So I actually have a Post-it note that says, "You're not the youngest person in the room anymore. You got to start acting like it." So, yeah, I think today for me, success is defined as being able to see people grow within my organization. I want to be able to promote folks, and again, not just within my organization, but outside of my organization. Well, I want to see people grow. From a people standpoint, that's how I would define success. From a business standpoint, success is really being able to create, I say sustainable a lot, and I think it gets confused with the ecological form of sustainable, but I mean sustainable that it can withstand the test of time. So creating sustainable processes that are going to be able to carry the business forward and evolve as the business evolves. So being able to create those processes that support the people and can deliver the results, right? When we can make sure that we have processes in place that give us the good information to make educated decisions, to make fast decisions, to change with this ever evolving supply chain world, as we've seen. I think that is what success is for me today. And it becomes, I would say, a little bit more complicated as you continue to grow in your leadership journey. Success, for me 10 years ago would have meant getting all my orders off the dock in time, right? To make their line haul shipments. And it's more task oriented. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Success at that time may have meant, getting a promotion to the next level or getting a promotion into another area of business. But as I think of success, it's kind of ever evolving as your career evolves and your career changes. And so success for me today probably isn't going to be the same definition in 5 or 10 years.
Which is so, like, what you just said kind of went light bulb, because I've never thought of it that way. Because you're right. I mean, when you really think back in time, I mean, all of it has changed, and then your life changes. Like, then I have my family and different. So yeah, I mean, that totally makes sense for an evolving concept of success.
And I think to your point, Nicole, I think it's also very dependent on your home situation too. Like success, I probably should have mentioned this earlier because my family's important, but success is balancing my work and my home life too, right? And making sure that my kids have everything that they need and my husband's feeling fulfilled in our marriage. Like that means success to me too. I don't want to sacrifice what I have in my personal life for work either. So I think that's a big piece of success for me, but not everyone's in that situation, right? So that's going to be different for different people.
That's a great answer. That's a great one. So I do have one bonus question that I would love to hear your response from. So why do you think women, more than men, are driven by fear so much in their professional lives?
I think primarily, Nicole, it's because we need more leadership women. We need more women in leadership in the organizations. And so I know when you and I first spoke, I said, Nicole, how have you done what you did? Like you're an inspiration to me to see what you've done in your career. And I think the more we can continue to see women to succeed and women to be pragmatic leaders that are able to drive results, that are able to build really collaborative, successful teams, that are able to engage with people, if not on the same level or better levels than our male counterparts. I think that's what's going to continue to help people and women specifically see the possibilities. But we can't wait for the possibilities to drive that. And so it's Olympics time. We all know that. And there's a couple of stories going around social media about how you never know it's possible until someone does it, but who's going to be the person who does it, right? When you see these world record times, and I think about, I grew up swimming, so I'm a swimmer, and Katie Ledecky is just killing it this year, right? And it's amazing to see her. And I was talking to my husband, and he goes, did you know that Katie holds the top 20 times in the world in this event? Like the fastest times in the world, she holds the top 20 of them. Mm-hmm. She didn't wait for anybody to do that for her to achieve that, right? And so I definitely want to, I want to lead by example. I want to be able to show other women what's possible and give them a platform to continue to grow. But I also want to see women outgrow me. And I don't want to just set the stage. And I know you're the same way, Nicole. And that's part of the reason why you founded this, right? Is because you never know what's possible until it starts being achieved. And so we can't let it hold us back just because we haven't seen it done before.
I agree. I love the idea of just even planting seeds, because I do think you're right. We do need more women in management, leadership, executive. I mean, I can keep going with the types of roles, but we also have to inspire women to be a little bit more audacious in their ask. I think if I can teach women anything, it's you have nothing to lose. Ask for every single thing that you want. And even if you don't think that you're ready, you will learn, Yes. So I totally agree. And I think that there's just such a fear of the word no. And we kind of hold ourselves back. I have one brief story. My nearest and dearest friend, she worked for a company that it was terrible. Like they literally said, like, we don't put women in project management jobs. We don't do this for women. And I'm like, why do you still work there? And I think she felt trapped in what she was doing. And so I'm like, we should at least make your resume. And she worked in the accounting department, and she's like, I print checks. And I'm like, you do so much more than that. So I almost needed to like sit with her to open her mind on her skill set. So that way she could feel her own work self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
And she ended up working. She works here now. Just come over here. So it wasn't even intentional to do that. I was trying to help her to get her resume out, and then I needed her help. So I was like, why don't you come over here? But
you saw the value.
I did, right? We have to empower some of these women to almost plant the seeds. Like, you have the ability, even if you don't check every single box on an application, that is okay, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think that's what this does, talking to people like you and getting your story out. Like, you had to start where you started. Everyone's journey is a little different, but
don't be afraid to make mistakes. I think that's something that I was definitely very fearful of early on in my career. I felt like I needed to do everything just right to be able to move on and to keep achieving that next level. And I started telling myself, and I think you brought it up, Nicole, we're so afraid of no. And I started saying, what's the worst they're going to say is no. And then we just move on, right? If someone says no, you move on. And sometimes no is just a beginning, right? Sometimes you have to keep working on that. But I remember as we were developing the logistics capability here at Ingredion, we were working through, and we come to this head when we're like, okay, well, how do we prevent this in the future? And you put together a report, and we're used to delivering bad news in logistics. So we started getting more visibility, and we're like, oh man, I really don't want to deliver this message because I know this person's going to be upset. And then we started talking about it. We coined this term as stop forecasting, because you don't know what's going to happen when you deliver that message. You don't know what's going to happen when you give that presentation. You don't know what's going to happen when you send that email. Stop forecasting. You don't know. Put it together at the best of your ability and see what they say, and then deal with their reaction, right? So
I'm jotting your little stop forecasting down.
Stop forecasting.
You have no idea.
You can't predict how people are going to respond to situations. Everyone has their own life experiences that makes them perceive things a certain way. So
I love that. Well, Crystal, I told you it would go really fast. We're out of time, but
oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
I know. So,
do you want to keep going?
Getting this little snippet, I know. I'm like, you can come back. Getting this little snippet from you has just been awesome. So, how can people reach out to you? If they want to learn more about you, or someone goes, hey, I want to ask her a quick question, what's the best way that they can contact you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Crystal Anderson. So feel free to shoot me a message, and I'd be happy to connect with you.
Well, thank you again for joining us today. I really appreciate it and love this chat.
Thank you. Likewise. Take care, Nicole.